My name is Dylan. I'm 27 years old. I identify as gay.
Do you remember what age you were when your sex ed started in school?
It was in the 5th grade. Starting sex ed in 5th grade was kind of awkward. We had like this box where we put in questions about just anything that we were curious about. And I remember I asked about nocturnal emissions. And I was friends with lots of girls. And I remember that one of them knew, she saw what I had written down. And when I put it in the box, I saw her looking around at everybody, and they all started laughing and pointing. And I got in trouble because I was trying to get everybody to be quiet because I was embarrassed. But it was just one of those awkward things, learning about something where everybody already was talking about, and it wasn't being talked about in a way that I remember I was taught. A lot of the teachers would tiptoe around words. They didn't like to say penis. They didn't like to say vagina. It was just strange to me. In 5th grade, when we started taking the sex ed course, it was probably just 1 week that we took out of the entire year. And that covered only just very basic things about how babies are formed. We didn't get further into STDs. We didn't get further into... They didn't start talking about abstinence, I think, until 7th grade. And then from there, it became abstinence only. They would say, condoms are 99% effective, but the only true way to not get any STD, to not get pregnant, is to abstain from sex. And that's what they would always say afterward, is abstain from sex, abstain from sex. But I knew people in that grade that were already having sex. We never talked about the psychological effects of sex. We never talked about abuse. We never talked about how that affects you and how that affects you psychologically later on. I became curious about sexuality pretty early on, I guess, when it normally starts. Puberty wise, around 10 or 12, I guess, is when I started to explore things like that. But I wouldn't really talk to my family so much about it. We were always very open, so if there was anything that I ever needed to go ask for, of course I could have. But at that age, I started to get a little bit more embarrassed about things that I was curious about because I was thinking about men. And my family was Christian, and we had just stopped going to church, so I didn't really know how any of that was going to go into play, how it was going to affect me. And of course, at that age, I thought that being gay meant that you go to hell. And so I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to be open about that. So if I was curious about things, basically it just kind of came out in the form of joking with my friends at school. We would make lots of sexual jokes. I didn't start going on the internet to learn about sex until high school. 1, just because we didn't really have high-speed internet access until then. 2, I always was I'm a good boy. I'm not going to look for any of that stuff. But once I did, the very first thing that I found was porn. And so that was the very first instance where I saw anything about gay sex. That was the very first place that I learned about it, because you don't learn about that in school. I never learned about the way that men are supposed to have sex with other men, the way that women are supposed to have sex with other women throughout public school. So it was just really interesting for me, the way that all of that, even to this day, how it still affects me, where I still feel a little insecure about it. If there's someone that I am interested in or attracted in, I don't usually seek them out because I'm still very insecure about how much time it takes. And I'm a little bit embarrassed by that too. So I think that there's a lot of things like that, that have affected me from that younger age, finding these outlets to educate myself about sex that really weren't educational at all. I came out to my family when I was 14. I didn't know anybody else who was gay. There were other people who my family speculated may be gay, but I just knew how I was feeling and how every day I felt when I came home and when I was looking at porn online, and that was all I kept on looking at. And I just knew there was something different, and I needed to be open about it, because I'm really bad at keeping secrets. I didn't feel included as a member of the gay community at all throughout my sexual education program until I got into college. But even then, it was kind of strange because we did this thing where we had, the teacher called it a pride panel. So members of the Pride Center came and spoke about just different things. People had questions. For any number of the people who were up there, they could answer them. That one day when everybody was up there, what was strange to me, which I feel perfectly fits into the way that we were brought up learning about sex, was that a lot of them didn't know how to answer questions. They would say, well, from my experience, rather than saying, this is how it's done, this is how you should prepare, this is the way that it works. They didn't have clear answers because there were no clear answers given to them They had to find what worked for them. I think the only way that sex ed helped me later on when I started to have sex was educating me about different STDs. The only good that did for me though was make me fearful, which actually isn't good at all. I should not use that word. It just made me fearful. So anytime I think about sex now, it's exciting, but it comes with that I don't want to do it because I'm afraid that I'm going to get an STD and die, or get an STD and that's the end of the world. Oh, there's no cure for it. And I think to that regard, I don't feel like that's very successful. There's certain things about sex that I am insecure about going into it. For instance, as a member of the gay community, I would probably be viewed as more feminine than masculine. And so looking at it that way, a lot of people are going to go into sex with me thinking that I'm going to bottom. And for me, that's very difficult to do. And so oftentimes when I've had sex with people, it's been something not enjoyable for me. And so if it's not enjoyable for me, if I'm taking it, it will not be enjoyable for the other person. And so oftentimes I will not have sex because I feel like I've not been educated in the proper way to do it, where I feel super insecure about myself, bad about myself going into it, where I go, well, I'll never be able to even talk to somebody for fear that first thing they're going to want to do is have sex. And I won't be prepared, I won't be ready for it. People don't have sex just to have babies anymore. People have sex for fun. And because it is a biological function, it's something that everyone's going to be doing. And I don't think that there should be any taboos around it. I feel like if there's something that someone asks, it should be answered, and it should be answered correctly. I definitely think that the educational programs should talk about the emotional aspect of sex. Just the broad spectrum of emotions that humans can have, all of them play out when you're having sex. And if more people knew about it going into it, I feel like people would do it in a smarter way. We need better sex ed because as a gay man, the very first time I had sex, I was completely lost.